Hey, hello everybody. Now, I know a lot of you have been really anticipating a tier list, especially because there are a lot of questions on how necessarily the characters stack up against each other and how good a lot of the characters are in this game. And I was really reluctant to put out a tier list prior to today for the simple fact that we didn't really know just how good each of the characters would be and how they would shape up going forward into the game. Now that we're solidly into Act 2 and the game has been out for a bit over 6 weeks, I feel like we have really been able to cement what is actually good on a lot of these units and what advantages or disadvantages are really going to help or harm them when it comes to their total effectiveness in this game. Now, when it comes to the characters, how I'm going to rank them, I'm going to mostly be gearing it more towards like T0 or like low tier performance compared to max talent, but I will keep in mind their max talent potential when it comes to these rankings as well. And of course, for characters like Wolf, I'm just gonna rate him at max talent because it's entirely for free. And we can probably expect a lot of the 4-stars to have more talents, though a lot of their best talents are locked at their T6, unfortunately. But without further ado, let's get into the tier list. I'm not really gonna go into it with any particular order, just gonna talk about all the different units. So starting out, I think it's pretty obvious that Helhest is going to be S tier. Now, there was definitely a lot of confusion for some people upon Helhest's initial release. I know for as many people who were saying that Helhest was broken, there were just as many people saying that she was garbage. And I was always in the camp that Helhest was broken, and I'm pretty sure that just about everybody who is really in tune with the meta and like actually paying attention to the character kits would be able to tell you that Helhest is one of the most busted characters in this game. I mean, if we just go over all the different things that she has in her character menu. So just taking a quick look at her relic ability, she's got passive damage bonus, she's got passive healing, both of which having a really good range. She's able to boost those damage bonuses healing literally every single time that she deploys or upgrades the drone. She's got this whole salvo, which is AoE damage, which also activates her weapon mastery, which gives her massive weapon mults, including a charge time reduction for both the bow and linear fusion rifle. She's got a super that literally just amplifies everything and deals a pretty decent amount of damage and healing itself. She's got speed support, and beyond all of that, she has a unique thing, which is the ability to generate heavy ammo for her entire team. All this together, combined with the fact that she's got really good weapons for damage, just makes her one of the most crazy characters in this entire game. A lot of people were saying that characters, like support characters in general, were not really going to be able to be like power crept or more future proof, and Helhest kind of really just took that whole notion and threw it right out the window. I imagine that Helhest is going to be a mainstay in just about every single piece of team content, and whenever there is piercing content in the game, I imagine that she's also going to be a lot of people's first picks. The ammo generation itself is just way too strong in order to just not bring her in terms of like a calamity ops, and there would have to be a character or a scenario that would be significantly better than not having that extra heavy ammo. So with that all said, is no other place for her than the S tier. Now, talking about the other arc piercing unit in this game, I'm gonna say that Attal is probably gonna be sitting around B tier. Now, I want to say that I don't think any of these characters in the game are necessarily like unusable, but when it comes to the strength of characters, there are obviously going to be ones that are going to be significantly better than others, and Helhest literally does everything that Attal does, just better. I mean, frankly, the only thing that Attal can do is buff super damage, but Helhest buffs all damage types compared to Attal. She's got better weapon damage, and even with like Attal's weapon mastery being ability damage focused, she still deals more damage with weapon artifacts compared to using ability artifacts. And with that in mind, it really just doesn't make sense to use her over literally any Helhest. Like, even a T6 Attal would probably still be significantly worse than a T0 Helhest. And unfortunately, she just doesn't have enough stuff across her weapon choices and her kit in order to really be able to push content freeze. Alright, well, moving on from that, I feel like it'd be pretty good to go for a 4-star and then a 5-star unit to pull a fire team in 3-man activity. Well, even still, like, why would you ever want to use that over Helhest? Like, Helhest just does the same thing without like the super she gives more damage buffs over time. She gives more damage herself, or deals more damage. She gives speed support, a better speed support than Attal gives, and it's just more consistent and gives the heavy ammo. Well, moving on from Attal, why don't we talk about Gwynn? So I'm gonna say that Gwynn is gonna be A tier, and I was pretty consistent in saying that I believe that Gwynn is A tier, and I still believe that's the case even with all the things that we've seen beforehand. I know a lot of people were putting Gwynn in S tier at the start of the game, and I was just sitting here thinking that she's probably not going to be all that useful when Impact rolls out, when it goes away. And considering that Impact left, you're not seeing like any Gwynns at all on any expanse, any like Calamity Ops runs. She's pretty solidly stuck in her niche. Now, granted, when it does come to Impact content, she is very, very good. Probably one of the best. When it comes to Calamity Ops, I think she edges out Jolder a little bit, just because she isn't as ammo reliant, though she is still pretty ammo reliant. Those issues definitely would have been improved when Helhest released. Unfortunately, when Helhest released, Impact went away. And of course, when Impact comes back, there's going to be a new Impact unit that is likely going to be strong, though of course we won't know until we see it. But she does have a lot of really good stuff in her kit. If I want to say what I think the difference between A tier and S tier would be, like A tier is strong, as in like strong in their niches, strong within the proper scenarios that they're in. So like for instance, in Impact content, Gwynn would be S tier, okay? But for a character to be like S tier, they would have to be S tier in like everything, meaning that basically you could really want them in just about every single scenario. All right, well, moving on from Gwynn, I'm gonna say that Jolder is going to be right next to her in A tier. Now, while I will say Gwynn is probably a bit more potent when it comes to like Impact content, Jolder is a lot more versatile than Gwynn is. Jolder's got better weapon options across her mythics, and she also has more builds and has rapid fire weapons on top of the Impact sword that she wields. Especially after the sword buffs, Jolder is very competitive with Gwynn, especially due to the fact that it's going to be a lot easier for people, or for most players, to get more copies of Jolder because she's going to be on standard banner rather than being a limited unit. Though, of course, if you're a whale, it would probably be easier to get a T6 limited compared to a T6 standard. But unlike Gwynn, who very much disappeared from all of the leaderboards as soon as Impact rolled away, we are still seeing the dedicated Jolder mains pushing the Expanse leaderboards on the Solar rapid fire side, especially due to weapons like Huckleberry. And Huckleberry was actually a pretty funny weapon throughout like all the different content. Jolder's exotic options were kind of like all over the place for the first few weeks of the game. First off, it was just like Huckleberry all the way, and then Partridge came out and people were like, oh yeah, Partridge is great, Huckleberry's crap. And then it comes out later that, oh wait, no, Huckleberry plus Cackalick is actually like the best thing, unless you need the solar damage and the arc damage and the blast damage. But just because of the fact that she has so many different options and she's so versatile and her most potent stuff is also really, really good, then she's got a lot going for her. Unfortunately, she doesn't have enough to make her top tier. When it comes to the like choices, if I had my own personal choice, whether having a maxed out Gwynn or a maxed out Jolder, personally, I would want to max out Jolder, but I will say that Gwynn is going to be slightly more potent, or maybe not slightly, maybe like marginally more potent in that void Impact content. But of course, Jolder does have the advantage of being significantly more useful outside of that. Let's talk about another 4-star unit, and when it comes to Finnala, I'm gonna be completely honest, I do not really see any real usage, or like any real good usage for Finnala. The highest I could probably put her is C tier. I don't think she's complete garbage, but she just really does not have a lot going for her. Unlike Jolder, she wields an auto rifle, and that being sweet business, and does not have any kind of auto loading whatsoever. It's pretty much just a worse version of Huckleberry with the catalysts and its boosts. It's just not going to be doing as much weapon damage, though the reason why you'd want to run Sweet Business is not because of Sweet Business's own damage, but more so due to the fact of the way that it interacts with her weapon mastery, being able to stack up Scorched all the way up. And of course, with the main thing with this is that you would be making the Scorched stacks max out with her T6, allowing to do the Scorched explosions, though again, this is going to be ability damage compared to weapon damage increases, which means that it's not going to be as good for like dealing with Shika's. Of course, when it comes to a rapid fire weapon, you wouldn't really want like extra damage increases regardless. But even if this was like essentially the same level of single target damage as a character like Estela, which it isn't, she still would be moving around like a brick and would be pretty single target focused with that damage. She does have some pretty decent abilities with her funerary flames, being able to suck enemies up together, but she also has some pretty bad downtime issues with a lot of her signatures. Super also just really isn't impactful, and again, she just doesn't have any movement whatsoever, and also just really doesn't have like the potency in a lot of her kit that characters like Jolder have. And that's probably why, like, even though it's solar rapid fire in the expanse right now, you can see a lot more Jolders going through and getting like high runs in this expanse, and you don't see a single Finnala. So I just frankly don't find her to be that strong and does not really offer a lot, especially compared to other units in this game. Now, I did 2 5-stars, so why don't I do 2 4-stars? So moving on from Finnala, I feel like Kabr is also pretty solidly in the B tier. I'd probably rank Kabr higher than Attal personally, and one of the main reasons behind that is that Kabr is actually a weapon damage unit. Now, I'm pretty sure he was ability damage in the beta, but he actually deals or has weapon damage multipliers with his weapon mastery, and it's actually pretty strong, being a 240% multiplier on the instance of weapon damage, though of course it's only going to be able to proc every 1 second, which does not really interact super well with a lot of his weapon choices, that being pulse rifles and also LMG. What Kabr would really want is a slow firing, high damage per shot LMG, something like, I don't know, Xenophage. But of course, without something like that, he's gonna be a bit more limited with his weapon mastery, though he does still have a lot of strengths going for him, especially when you're dealing with content that isn't necessarily speed oriented, and the biggest challenge is of course going to be surviving. And he's got a lot of benefits in that sense. His blinding shield actually deals a pretty good amount of damage. Whenever he blinds an enemy, he instantly triggers his health regeneration, meaning that he's probably going to be one of the most survivable units in this entire game, because basically you can just toss out literally any of his abilities and it's going to pretty much instantly fill up his entire health bar. And not only that, he's got his barrier, which when it comes to the barriers themselves, these are actually like really strong because of a certain attribute on the artifacts. And I know pretty much everybody hates seeing barrier bonus because they're using characters that don't have barriers, because there's only like 3 characters in this game and one of them is Jolder and it only activates under super, but you actually get a really strong damage resistance bonus from being around your barrier. So that is one really nice thing about Kabr and future barrier units. And his super is also like pretty great in all honesty. Like, you're able to spam it out really fast, especially if you're using it in the air, and it's just constantly chaining around all of those enemies and also just constantly blinding enemies as well. I really feel like Kabr could wind up being really strong if he winds up getting some better artifact support. So for instance, if we get a barrier unit in the future and we get some dedicated barrier artifacts, I could foresee Kabr jumping up a lot more in strength, especially when he gets some better weapon options for his weapon mastery in general. Alright, well, moving on from him, we of course got more 5-star units to talk about. And I feel like I honestly feel like if I put Estela in S tier, she would be like the very bottom of S. I feel like Estela is a bit more potent than both of these units in her own niche. Estela in the kind of like rapid fire stuff, like in content like that, would probably be a bit better than like how good Jolder and Gwynn is personally. At least like comparing her in her niche compared to like characters like Jolder and Gwynn in their niches. Also at the same time, she has literally 0 speed. We have already wound up in a situation prior where Estela literally got dropped out of her teams because she just could not move through the map fast enough. People were running double Ning Fei in the previous Calamity Ops compared to running a Ning Fei and an Estela. So even though she is like really potent in her like damage and clearing capabilities, especially due to the fact that it's all ability damage, meaning that she basically has 0 ammo worries whatsoever, especially when she's at T6 and is constantly building up that corruption. Unfortunately, she literally moves like a brick. Even with speed support from Helhest, she'd still be maneuvering around the map slower because no lightweight weapon and Warlock jump, unfortunately. So I'd say she's top of A, but definitely not S tier. Well, next character up, I'm gonna say Ikora is going straight up in the C tier. And this is coming from somebody who has built Ikora, who has played Ikora. She's just not that great. I'm gonna be completely, she's not that great at all. Now, I will say the light grenade launcher, really nice. This present fleet will chunk down enemies really good. Rocket launcher is also pretty nice. Unfortunately, Ikora does not really do anything for these weapons whatsoever. These weapons are probably doing more for Ikora than Ikora is doing herself. And a lot of that comes down to the fact that she just does not have a really well put together kit. Her cooldowns are exceptionally long, being 30 seconds, and her ability damage isn't even that stellar for how long her cooldowns are. And her Nova Bomb, while it is one of the biggest super nukes, like one-hit nukes in the entire game, there are so many situations in which you will throw this thing out and it will literally, the enemy will just move slightly to the left while it just slowly moves through the air and just completely miss. Especially when we've got bosses like the Servitor in the latest Calamity Ops, just decide, okay, I'm gonna be over there now. And then your Nova Bomb just completely misses. That alone will literally just kill an entire run. But even with her passive, Mass Acceleration, which by this isn't going to be proccing nearly as much as you think, it's only a 20% recharge within 5 seconds. So that is only about 6 seconds off of her cooldown every 5 seconds. If this was like 2 seconds or 1 second, then I'd say it'd probably be a bit better, or she'd be a bit better. But of course, you still are entirely reliant on those enemy defeats, rather small increments of ability regen. Her talents don't actually make her all that much better. She does get some better ability damage multipliers. A talent 0 Ikora isn't going to be really doing many things different than a talent 6. She's just mostly going to be doing slightly more damage and having a bit better cooldowns. And I mean like a bit. The other thing that is really holding her back, honestly, is just the fact that we haven't really had any blast content in the game. And as soon as we do get more blast content in the game, there's going to be a mythic unit that is almost definitely going to be better in every single way compared to Ikora, which frankly, I'd say unfortunately for her, that's going to be the case. But I'm going to be completely honest, even if that wasn't going to be a new 5-star that just completely invalidated Ikora, Wolf would probably be the preferred character simply because he's just simply a much better unit overall than her and provides actual support to his team beyond just doing whatever Ikora does. I'm gonna be honest, she just does not do a lot whatsoever. The best thing that she does is group enemies together, and this is a pretty unique thing about her. Well, I would say it's a pretty unique thing about her. Unfortunately, we got a new unit, Rossi 11, who also does grouping and confinement, but also locks all the enemies inside of a barrier. Enemies are grouped up and the enemies can't do anything against it. When you're going up against some tough guys, necessarily a heavy shank, this would definitely be a much better confinement option. So with all that in mind, Ikora C tier, sitting right next to Finnala. All right, now when it comes to another 5-star unit, another piercing unit, I'd say Tantu is definitely A tier. A lot of people, like prior to the Helhest release, would have been putting Tantu S tier, and like even myself, even if Helhest didn't exist, I'm not even sure if Tantu would necessarily be potent enough in stuff like Calamity Ops or even the Expanse to really super warrant putting him in an S tier position. He's definitely a lot closer to these units than he is closer to, well, Helhest or any other S tier. The main niche that Tantu had prior to any piercing content in the endgame was just essentially being there for team damage support. Unfortunately, now we have better team damage support units for DPS scenarios. So I will say he is still a good unit, though he does have some neutral game issues, especially before T6, because he doesn't really have like really good AoE. And while his fireball is a really strong option, you do have to manage its cooldown and you are just entirely limited to single target damage. And I'm pretty sure in a lot of scenarios, you would probably want an Estela over a Tantu, just in general, because Estela is going to wind up doing more damage. She's going to wind up supporting the team more in the clearing phases, but obviously having that damage boost was really good. Unfortunately, now we have better damage boosts in the game. All right, well, I feel like it'd be good to rapid fire some more 4-stars. Ranked a lot of the 4-stars lower than A tier, so why don't I talk about some of the the 4 stars that I think are actually good. One of which, of course, being Wolf. And I'd probably put Wolf somewhere around here. I definitely think that he is a really, really strong unit. Something I will say about Wolf is that I don't think he's going to be the best in slot in just about any scenario. Of course, that might change depending on like a Calamity Ops, but the main strength of Wolf is that he's going to be useful in just about every single piece of content. The massive AoE of the Satya Elixir Smart Bomb Grenade Launcher, and the fact that he can essentially just constantly pump out those shots. He's got team speed support, he's got great survivability, he is a really, really good general use unit, and probably the best general use unit in the entire game. The only other unit that I'd say matches Wolf on like a level of versatility and kind of being able to be used in just about everything is Jolder. I'd say they're like, you know, decently equal, especially when taking into account that Jolder's movement isn't as strong as Wolf's, and Wolf also has some other things like the finisher on ability hits. But unfortunately, I don't think his level of potency in this game is really enough to put him all the way up into S tier. Now, talking about another really, really good 4-star in this game, I'd say Umeko is also A tier. I value Umeko over Tantu for a few reasons, one of which is that she's able to spread out her damage buffs a lot more. So in a scenario like Calamity Ops, she would probably be a lot better than Tantu for like team support. And additionally, she also has some really, really potent speed support with her invisibility cast, and also being able to give that entire team invisibility, healing, and speed boost, and just moving through a lot of the content. The other thing is that she has that really, really massive reload speed buff, meaning that she can make use of a weapon like Izanagi's Burden a bit better, though I still think that Polaris Lance would probably be the third exotic on her, just simply because weapons like the Sidereal are just going to be a bit better overall regardless. I don't really think that it would be any surprise to say that Ning Fei is any lower than S tier. Ning Fei is still far and above the best unit in this entire game, simply because he is the fastest unit and also just deals really, really good damage himself. And a lot of that damage is very front loaded, which is really beneficial because all the content is speed content in this game. There's not really any reason to have like sustained characters or like sustained damage over time. Of course, that could always change in the future. They could add different end games and different game modes in order to essentially prop up characters that aren't necessarily as fast or as burst damage focused. We haven't seen anything like that. They haven't communicated anything like that, and it probably won't be the case until several months later in the game. It's going to be really, really difficult to push Ning Fei out of the meta just simply because he is just that fast and is that potent. I mean, prior to this most recent update, Ning Fei's were outperforming Gwyn's in the Void Impact expanse. So even outside of rapid fire content, Ning Fei is still going to be extremely good no matter what, especially because the advantage of being able to move through those arenas significantly faster than every single other character in this game is just going to be entirely unmatched. That even if we got a situation where it's like blast and piercing, Ning Fei is probably 2 worst Shinkas, he's still gonna be running through all those arenas, clearing enemies as fast as he possibly can, and supporting his other 2 teammates, which would probably be Helhest and whatever mythic blast unit comes out then, just because he's that fast. Additionally, one of the main strengths of Ning Fei is also the fact that he has access to the best artifacts in this game. All of the best artifacts are either related to casting movement abilities or casting summons, which he's got both of on very high uptime, meaning that he's able to activate one of the highest damage multipliers, like general damage multipliers, very constantly throughout all of his damage rotation. And you don't even have to do anything weird with it. Like, you would literally just summon slam super, or summon super slam, or super summon slam, no matter what. Like, you would always have these damage boosts up throughout all of the rotations that you would be doing. With all that in mind, on top of the fact that he just has a really, really good kit that gets even better when you get more talents on him, it's no surprise that he's just absolutely dominating every single piece of content in this game. Now, obviously, we've got 2 final units, and I'll say one of these units I feel like is going to be really good, and the other unit, I'd say less so. Currently, I'd say Xuan Wei, probably B tier, maybe. I mean, I definitely haven't seen as much performance regarding Xuan Wei compared to characters like Kabr and Attal, but do I think that he's on the same tier as Finnala and Ikora? I'm not sure. I'd say probably bottom of B tier right now. And like, he's just got a lot of the same issues compared to some other units where, one, he is a weapon damage unit. That is something that is going for him 100%, that he is a weapon damage unit. Unfortunately, he doesn't really have a lot of crazy good stuff. His ability casts just aren't really doing crazy amounts of damage. His tether is like good for grouping, but also doesn't really do much beyond that. I'm really just not sure exactly like how potent he could really be tuned be. Obviously, of course, it would be, he does have potential. Okay, I will say that, though he is going to be very, very exotic reliant. I feel like Chaperone's probably going to be the best thing for him damage wise. Octant Riot would also, well, would it be super? I'm not really sure about Octant. It really just depends. I haven't really seen nearly as much cooking regarding Xuan Wei compared to units like Attal and even Kabr. And one of the main issues with Xuan Wei is just the fact that he essentially doesn't have a primary weapon. This fusion rifle deals so little damage and also just does not really have good perks or good perk combos. If he winds up getting like a rapid fire fusion in the future or a fusion rifle with better perks, he might wind up jumping up a little bit. But at the same time, I just haven't really seen him be, I haven't really seen people cook with him, like just period. I'm not even really sure if I saw people clear with Xuan Wei all that well, even when it was impact expanse. Me as Ikora might have actually gotten a better time than all the Xuan Weis in the previous impact expanse. Though I'm not going to say that definitively. I don't have any evidence or proof. I didn't see any of them on the leaderboards. I just know that I got a sub 5 on the previous expanse with Ikora. I'm not sure about the Xuan Weis. And the final character that I'm going to rank. So I'd say Rossi 11. Right now, I'd probably put him at the top of B tier, though he might jump up to the bottom of A tier. But currently, Rossi has some really, really interesting things going for him. So one of the things about Rossi 11 that is definitely going for him, that is an advantage that a lot of other units in this game don't have, is the fact that he has really, and I mean really, really good overshield uptime. He's probably the best unit in the game for applying overshield and keeping it applied. And that comes down to his passive, which is literally going to be constantly applying overshield so long as you are in combat. Additionally, his skill, Threat Flow, is actually going to be doing a pretty decent amount of ability damage. On top of the fact that he also has a super, which is going to be a nuke that'll deal as much damage as a Nova Bomb, so long as you let it sit out beforehand, which if you are playing a like boss scenario, which you would want that huge damage boost in, and you're like actually mastering the content that you're playing, being able to set up that photoelectric gate beforehand would not be an issue whatsoever. Additionally, like I mentioned before, he has the really, really great grouping ability right here with the Arcage, and this is another thing that is a really, really rare skill in this game currently, and that is the fact that it counts as a barrier. Having these rare and potent skills is going to be really good because this gives Rossi 11 artifact options that are going to be significantly better than pretty much every single other ability damage unit in this game other than Estela. And the reason why I say that, I think it's the only unit in the game that can stack up 4 damage resistance buffs for sympathetic evolution. All those include our barrier bonus, this counts, and it did test it, Ring of Courage, Unrelenting Ground, and Unrelenting Evolution. And that's 4 damage resistance buffs, bring this all the way up to a 28% damage increase from sympathetic evolution on top of the 20% increase from Ring of Courage. And this stacks all the way up to a 48% damage multiplier from its artifacts, a 20 and a 28, which is almost as much as Ning Fei's. Ning Fei only having about, let's see, I think it was like 12% more? No, 10%. Yeah, Ning Fei only has 10% more damage mult than Rossi 11 from his artifacts. And this is going to be extremely consistent because when you're dealing your damage, you're going to want to have that gate up because of his passives and because of his talents. So much like Ning Fei, you can get that max out damage increase in basically like the primary scenarios that you'd want without really having to essentially do any playstyle weirdness whatsoever. Especially because if you've got your barrier up, you don't really have to worry about strafing around because all the enemies are stuck behind this wall that's going to be eating up all the damage for you. And he also just frankly has some really good talents. Being able to provide overshield to his allies, getting a massive multiplier onto his super, which I'm pretty sure this makes it deal more damage than Ikora's Nova Bomb, which is kind of crazy in my opinion. And also just making it so that he has even more ability damage in general. I'm definitely going to be keeping a good eye on Rossi 11, a close eye on Rossi 11. If there are any characters that I could could see getting shifted up a rank, I'd say Rossi 11 is probably the primary one in this game. But his barrier has health. Well, guess what, dude? Like, it has a frankly massive amount of health, at least for like the content that you're gonna be like using him in. And that barrier is going to get, its health is going to get increased by that barrier bonus. But that just about goes for every single unit in this game. Definitely a lot of things to cover, a lot of really good units. Of course, there are only a couple units that I can really say are definitively the best of the best. And yes, also he does have access to Mahamiri, one of the best weapons in this game, with also the added thing of having a bow, meaning that he's also really good against piercing, which is another really good thing going for Rossi. But that just about covers every single unit in this game. If you think that I ranked certain characters too high or too low, be sure to discuss in the comments below. And if you feel like I missed something on a character that would really like benefit them, be sure to let me know as well. Personally, I feel like this is the best ranking for all the different units with the current weapon setup that we have, with current activities that we have in this game. What is going to be the strongest options going forward? So be sure to subscribe so that you can keep up to date on all of the best options going forward in this game. With that all out of the way, thank you all so much for watching, and as always, I will see you all next time.